I think we'll get started. I'm John Hiatt. I'm the Emeritus Vice Dean for Faculty. I've served as Vice Dean for Faculty for the past 10 years, and I'm joined by Cindy Cordova from our office, who's running the Zoom today, and Dr. Joaquin Kim Madrinas, who's Assistant Dean and has been running the activities of our office during this transitional period. This Junior Faculty Lecture Series program is one that we've done for many years. The idea of the program, and it's for junior faculty of all ages, but the idea is to give an introduction to various aspects of the nuts and bolts of the academic personnel process. We call the program Navigating the Academic Roadmap, and it's a monthly series, sometimes with more than one program a month for topics that we hope will be of interest. The program is being recorded and it will be put up on a website subsequently. I'm going to give a couple times for questions right in the middle after one portion of the presentation, and then there also will be an opportunity for questions at the end. I'm going to wait just 1 minute because I see that people are still signing on. We'll give it just about 30 seconds and then we'll get going. All right, well, again, thanks to everyone for being here. We're going to talk today about the Health Sciences Compensation Plan. One of the activities of my office, one of the duties of the Vice Dean for Faculty is to oversee the comp plan. 10 years into it, I still say this is an artist's conception of the plan, simplified. It is complicated. There are complicated aspects of it, but for people who are members, understanding the rules, following the rules is an obligation. So I'm going to try to give an introduction to the various aspects today. And please know that both your departments and our office should be considered a resource at any time if there are questions about any of the aspects that I talk about today, and anything in relation to academic personnel. So today's topics, we'll talk about the Health Sciences Compensation Plan. I'm going to several times talk about the philosophical underpinnings of the plan, why it is the way it is, why the outside professional activities are handled the way they are, and how it works for individual faculty members in relation to salary setting, outside professional activities, and then some nuts and bolts about the plan. So where do I find the Health Sciences Compensation Plan? The comp plan is codified.
Yeah.
Could everybody go on mute, please?
Sorry, is it the way?
Dr. Hiatt, I think you're muted on accident.
Somehow somebody muted me. If you go to the Academic Personnel Manual, go to Salary Administration, and then to that's section 4, you'll find these two chapters, if you will, APM 670 and APM 671, the Health Sciences Compensation Plan, and the Conflict of Commitment policies. Another resource is that our Academic Affairs Office has a website, and one of the pages is about academic salary, where there are many references about the plan, the implementing procedures that I'll be talking about, FAQs, a slideshow, many resources that we hope will be useful in relation to these matters. So these are the three principal documents, APM 670, 671, and the school implementing procedures. And first, I'm going to talk about APM 670, the comp plan itself. What is the purpose of the plan? The purpose is to provide a common administrative framework whereby a health sciences school can compensate its faculty according to the competitive requirements of the discipline. So stated simply, the comp plan is a way that faculty members in our school can be compensated above the base salary for their rank and step, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. And in exchange for that privilege, there's some rules. It's really that simple. It's a way to pay faculty members above the base salary and a set of rules and policies that go along with that. Am I a member of the plan? And by the way, if you're not a plan member, you may want to use this hour in some other way because this really will not probably be of direct interest, although everybody is welcome. So who are members of the Health Sciences Compensation Plan? It's individuals in health sciences schools who hold a university appointment at greater than 50% of full-time in one of these series. And you'll recognize the series in which you're appointed in this list. If you are appointed and paid by the university at greater than 50% of effort, so 51% and above, in one of these academic series, you're a member of the plan. If you work, for example, at the VA or at the county and are compensated 100% there, you probably are not a member of the plan. We do have faculty members who have a percent of effort here and are plan members, but most faculty members working in the affiliated institutions are not members of the plan. Is membership optional? No. If you meet the condition that I showed on the last slide of greater than 50% appointment in one of those academic series, this is a term and condition of appointment. And in your appointment letter, you will see that there were a set of links to the various plan documents. We used to, when we lived in the era of paper, we would send everybody a copy of all these documents so that they could be thrown away without being looked at. Now we put up the links so that they can be ignored. But again, please know that there's material in these links that really is important, and that adherence to the rules of the plan is an obligation of employment. And in fact, plan members sign a plan statement, an agreement to adhere to the rules of the plan when they join the faculty, and then they forget they did it years later when something comes up. But you will have signed on to the plan if you're a plan member when you were appointed to the faculty. Now I want to talk a little bit about the salary components. The title of the talk was Easy as XYZ, and now I'm going to talk a little bit about what X, Y, and Z actually mean and how they are used in putting a person's salary together. So let's take each piece in turn. X is what's often called the base salary. X is determined by step and rank. So if you're an assistant professor, step 3 in surgery, your X, or your base salary, X is not used on campus, but your base salary is the same as an assistant professor, step 3 in history or anthropology. It's set by the rank and step. It's set by the university each year, and it is published each year on a kind of website that I'm going to show you here in just a couple of minutes. X prime is the retirement factor, and this is one of the pieces that's unique to the compensation plan. X prime is a fraction or a multiplier of X, and it's determined by what's called an academic programmatic unit, or an APU. If you're a member of the comp plan, you've been placed into an academic programmatic unit, which is usually usually reflects your department or your division, but it may go one step deeper than that. The way that I like to think of it is an APU is a group of people with like characteristics. So it might be all pediatricians doing clinical practice here on campus. It so happens that several years ago, our basic science departments adopted a single set of compensation plan bylaws and agreed that everybody in a basic science department would be set with some qualification to this. We can talk more about it if you want, but basically everyone is set at APU scale 3. The scales go from 1 to 8. Scale 0 means that there is no retirement increment or retirement factor. And unfortunately, it's logical to a point. Scales 1 to 5 are straight multipliers. Scale 1 is 10%, scale 5 is 50% of X. Scale 6 is 65%, scale 7 is 80%, scale 8 is 100%, and then scale 9, which is not used in the school, is 125%. So the sum of X and X prime is what's called the covered compensation for retirement purposes. And this is important because the ultimate retirement benefit is ultimately pegged to this amount. This is one of the main reasons you want to be promoted regardless of your academic series, because as you go up in rank and step, your X and X prime increase, and this will affect your ultimate retirement benefit. The sum of X and X prime is often called the base salary rate, and then multiplied by whatever your percent of effort, it becomes the base salary. So most people that are 100%, so X and X prime is often called the base salary. But if somebody is appointed at less than 100% on the comp plan, then their base salary rate would be, let's say someone is appointed at 75% on the comp plan, then their base salary rate would be prorated to 75% of the sum of X and X prime. And you can look up the various scales to see what the actual compensation becomes. So here's an example, and this just shows the link on one of the university's websites. This is the Health Sciences Compensation Plan professorial scale for salary scale 3, which, for example, is the typical scale for basic scientists and for basic science departments, and it just shows the annual and monthly salary, the sum of X and X prime for this scale. And there's a scale, there's a similar document or a similar table for every scale on the plan. People who are not, who don't get an X prime would be considered to be at scale 0. And the concept of scale 0 or just X does come up later in discussion of outside professional activity. So we'll come back to that, but we don't have any faculty members on the plan who are at scale 0 except in very, very special cases. Why is the delta? I'm going to talk in a minute about the concept of TNS, the total negotiated salary. Why is the difference between the total negotiated salary and the sum of X and X prime? So it's called the delta. It comes from activities. It comes from grants and or clinical earnings. For clinicians, it typically comes from clinical earnings. And now this kind of goes back to the philosophical underpinning that people getting grants and having clinical earnings deserve to earn more than simply the base salary. The comp plan is a way to do that. And most of that is done through the provision of Y, but it can be 0. I'll come back to this. You can't be paid. You cannot, under the plan, be paid any lower than the sum of X and X prime, but you don't have to be paid more than that. Z is the bonus, and it generally represents a contribution beyond the primary responsibility, including the clinical earnings that a faculty member generates based upon his or her clinical practice. At times, it's paid for a set of duties. So someone may get an agreement for a Z payment in return for some administrative function on a time-limited basis, usually a year, in a department. The actual payment schedule, whether it's quarterly in some departments or monthly in others, is determined and stated in the department, and if there's a divisional set of bylaws, either the department or divisional health sciences compensation plan bylaws. In the Department of Medicine, there is a Z component that's based on RVU generation. So kind of putting this piece together now, the sum of X, X prime, and Y is the total negotiated salary, the TNS. And this is an obligation that is set down at the beginning of the academic year when a faculty member is informed what her or his TNS will be, with the understanding that the monthly payment must be 1/12 of the TNS. There is an annual negotiation with the chair, or should be an annual salary letter that states a number of conditions of the plan, but most specifically what the person's salary breakdown is based upon the academic rank and step, and then any Y income that is going to be provided. And if there is Z income that has been negotiated as part of a person's activities, that will be noted as well. And again, as I've said previously, the total negotiated salary under the rules of the plan cannot be less than the sum of X and X prime, again, prorated to the person's percent of effort. So if a person is at 75% effort, the minimum total negotiated salary will be 75% of the sum of X and X prime based upon the rank, the step, and the academic programmatic unit. So that's a whirlwind through the components of salary, and it represents maybe a natural question point or a stopping point. So if there are questions about that, I'd be pleased to take them either now or also take them at the end. I think you can raise hands, but if somebody just wants to, you can also just unmute yourself and yell out questions. And by the way, feel free to put questions into the chat, and I'll just immediately deputize Dr. Madrinas to keep an eye on the chat to see if there are questions that are coming up along the way. But anything anyone would like to ask, before I go on to outside professional activities, which is the second portion of the presentation, questions about what I've said about how salary components are assembled. All right, well, we'll keep going and we'll be happy to answer questions about this at the end as well. So now I'm going to go on to the other really important aspect of the presentation and the other important set of responsibilities for plan members, and it has to do with outside professional activities. So one key document is what's called APM 671, and from 2015 on, 671 was put into the academic personnel manual as a document specifically speaking about conflict of commitment and outside professional activities, and I'll speak about how those are defined in a minute, for plan members. There is a chapter of the APM called APM 025, which covers non-plan members and used to cover all faculty. But since 2015, excuse me, APM 671 has been in effect. And 671 and the plan inform what are called the implementing procedures. So the implementing procedures represent the local, our school's local implementation of the health sciences compensation plan. They are obligated by APM 670 and 671. They have to be ultimately approved by the Office of the President. And sort of like, we'll talk about this another time, but you may know that we have the Academic Personnel Manual for most rules in relation to academic process and procedure. Then we have what's called the call for UCLA's implementation of those rules. It's kind of analogous in that like the call, which represents the local implementation of rules relating to academic appointment and promotion, the implementing procedures represent UCLA's implementation of the rules of the compensation plan. And to the extent that there are elections or choices that can be made, the implementing procedures identify them and at times reserve them at the level of the school, and at times will delegate them down to the level of departments, because the implementing procedures inform a set of compensation plan bylaws that each department must create and then maintain. So all of these documents exist and they're important. And again, you're going to see a couple of places as I continue on where there actually are choices that have been made either by the school or the department in relation to some of the rules of the plan. The implementing procedures, along with 671 and 670, which was here, again, are provided in links at the time that a plan member joins the faculty and signs on to the plan. So now we're going to talk about conflict of commitment and outside professional activities, and we'll talk again first at 30,000 feet about some of the principles, then some definitions, some types of outside activities, some thresholds in relation to time and income. So here's a slide showing the basic philosophical underpinnings of this part of the compensation plan. The principle is that as faculty members in the university, our primary professional allegiance is owed to the university. It's owed to our day job. The university hires us to do our day job, and it expects us to do our day job. Outside professional activities have value. And I just want to, before I finish that sentence, I want to say that there actually is encouragement in APM 671 for us to share the expertise that has brought us to the university to begin with, and for us to do the things that we do at the university, to actually share that outside of the university. So these activities have value, but they may create a conflict of commitment between the time we owe to the university and the time that could be spent in an outside activity. APM 671 manages those conflicts of commitment and defines the rules in relation to disclosures, approvals, and reporting. And I'm going to go through each of these in turn. So the definition of an outside professional activity is an activity that's within the faculty member's area of professional and academic expertise that advance or communicate that expertise through interaction with industry, the community, or the public. So there is an exclusion that I'll show you later for outside activities that are not directly related to the skill set for which the university employs you. I've seen people try to use that exclusion correctly, and I've seen people try to use that exclusion incorrectly. But basically, you have to ask yourself, or I'll help you ask yourself, why does a university employ me? What is the skill set that I'm bringing? Is it because, you know, I'm a surgeon scientist, let's say. I'm a general surgeon, I do surgery, I take trauma call, and I run a laboratory. Or I'm a clinician educator, and my main role is to be in clinical practice as a pediatrician and to teach pediatric resident students rotating on pediatrics and so on. I mean, that's really the first question that has to be asked when trying to decide if something is an outside professional activity. Excuse me. A conflict of commitment occurs when the outside activity has the potential to interfere with the professional obligations to the University of California. So that's talking, first of all, just about the time that might be spent. Is there a possibility that this activity is going to interfere with the time that I owe the university as a faculty member in the university? And then, so time is the critical aspect, and then there's the aspect of compensation. And this is a point I'm going to hit on a couple of times during the remainder of the presentation, but just to make the point that compensation includes all kinds of remuneration. And people don't always think about this, but some of the very important rules are related to non-cash remuneration, stock options, and so on that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So the simplest thing to understand is I do a workshop for industry, and they give me a certain amount of money for doing that. That's kind of simple to understand. That's money. But if I receive a stock or stock options in return, let's say for founding a company or some other service to a company, that also represents remuneration that has to be valued. So these are some of the, and we'll talk about it more in a few minutes here, but these are some of the rules that are the most important and the least understood. They're not relevant to most faculty members, but for faculty members where they're relevant, they're extremely important, and I'll explain why. Now, the compensation plan 671 places, and also APM 025 for the campus at large, places outside activities in categories. And I don't know why they chose this nomenclature, but they are categories 1, 2, 3, and others. So what they do is they put them into categories, and then they treat them differently depending upon the types of activities that are included in the categories, as I'll show them. Categories 1 and 2 are regulated directly by the Health Sciences Compensation Plan. They are subject to approval and reporting requirements that I will describe using the OATS electronic tracking system, and they are subject to thresholds. There are 2 thresholds that have to be adhered to. The first is the maximum time for outside activities, and the second is the maximum income that may be retained, and I'll talk about that. First, I'm going to talk about the categories themselves, and the ones to pay particular attention to are categories 1 and 2, and if ever someone has a question about where an activity falls in what category, it's an important question to ask. And if you can't get the answer either from the OATS tracking system or from your department, we would always be willing to be a resource to help with this. Category 1 activities are the ones that are most likely to create a conflict of commitment because, first of all, they're related to the training and expertise which qualifies you for a UCLA appointment, and they require a significant professional commitment. So the catchphrase that I keep in my mind about category 1 is it represents employment outside of the university. It's like having another job outside of the university. It's either teaching, research, or administration of a grant at an outside institution. It's an actual job outside of the university. Assuming a founding or co-founding role of a company requires disclosure, and taking an executive or a managerial position outside of the university. I don't know that I have it on a slide, but a good way to know whether, if you're receiving compensation, whether it's a category 1 or 2 activity, if you're getting a W-2, it's probably a category 1. And if you're getting a 1099, it's probably a category 2. I'm going to come to category 2 in a minute. So faculty must obtain prior approval from the chancellor's office to engage in a category 1 activity. So the activity is logged into OATS and it requires approval, like many things in academic process and procedure, first by the department chair, and then by our office, by the dean, and then by the chancellor's office. And I'll talk about OATS later, but in an effort to make this as menu-driven and as easy as possible, the OATS system tries to help you navigate through this. But this is an important requirement that isn't always obeyed, but should be, that you're supposed to get pre-approval before undertaking a category 1 activity. Category 2 activities are the typical kinds of activities that faculty members most often do as outside professional activities under the comp plan. They're outside the course and scope of the university employment and have a lesser potential for conflict of commitment. It's typically consulting kinds of activities that are category 2. And I don't expect you to be able to read this, but this is published in APM 671. And it's things like consulting either within or outside the university, testifying as an expert witness, consulting for a government agency, serving as on a board of directors of a company, presenting a workshop for industry, the type of thing that would be the most typical kinds of outside professional activities for our faculty. Faculty may engage in category 2 activities without prior approval. They do have to be reported within the year that they're done, but they do not require pre-approval. Sometimes faculty members will have activities that are a combination of category 1 and category 2. Founding of a company maybe, but also serving on a board of directors of the company. The founding portion does require pre-approval. The ongoing service on the board, as long as it doesn't represent an employment relationship, probably does not. Category 3 activities are the types of things that we do within the course and scope of our day jobs and are unlikely to cause conflict of commitment. But the basic principle for all of these activities is they can't interfere with your day job. They can't interfere with the faculty members' primary obligations to the university. So things like serving on a government or professional panel, serving as an officer of professional society, the kinds of things that are important as a component of service as we assemble our dossiers for merit increases and promotions. Reviewing manuscripts, acting in an editorial capacity, including such things as serving on an editorial board, attending and presenting talks at scholarly conferences, and just developing scholarly or creative work, which obviously is something that's expected in most or all of the academic series. Category 3 activities, even if compensated, don't require prior approval, don't require disclosure in annual reporting. It is an honor system. It's an honor system. Don't count toward the various time limits and income limits that I'm going to show you in just a minute. And then there's a set of activities separate from category 3 that in the wisdom of the framers of the plan are called other. And these are shown here. So prizes, royalties, true royalties, as defined here, honoraria, which are payments from agencies outside the university for occasional lectures or similar public appearances. These are very specifically not workshops for industry. That's a payment for an outside professional activity. That's a category 2 activity. It's not an honorarium, but for example, giving a talk at another university, inside or outside the university, and receiving compensation is an other activity. Administrative stipends are aspects of covered compensation that are paid for certain administrative positions in the university, like department chairs. And then this is an important one that I kind of foreshadowed earlier. It's income from a profession unrelated to the reason that the university has hired you. So, if you play in a doctor's symphony and are getting some money for that, that's probably okay, as long as you're not also jointly appointed in the music department. But it would be something like that. Think of a colorectal surgeon I know who wrote Armenian cookbooks. That's the kind of thing that would actually probably either be a royalty or an honorarium, but that's the kind of thing that's not directly related to the primary employment relationship with the university. But I would ask you, if you have a question about that, to please ask your department and/or our office about it, because we all want to pay as little in taxes as possible. We want to interpret the rules in as generous a way as possible. But I've seen faculty members that have been a little bit off in this, where we've made the determination that the other activity really does utilize the expertise for which the university is employing the person. So it should be listed in one of the other categories, usually category 2. Other activities, even if they're compensated, don't require prior approval, don't require disclosure, and don't count toward either of the 2 thresholds that I'm gonna talk about in the next few slides. Other, the same as I said for category 3 activities. So now going back to category 1 and category 2 activities. So category 1, again, an employment relationship outside the university. Category 2, the typical consulting kinds of activities. There's, first of all, a maximum annual time limit for compensated and uncompensated activities. And the plan obligates that this would be no less than 21 and no more than 48 days. The school has delegated this choice to departments. So your departmental bylaws will state whether the maximum time limit is 21 days, 48 days, or some amount in between. I'll talk about it in a minute, but going between 21 and 48 requires approval. Going over 48 is not going to happen. And then there's an annual earning approval threshold, which has been set by the school at these amounts, which I'll talk about in a minute. So now, having stated that as a preamble, back to each of these in turn. The maximum annual time limit, and a day, by the way, is set in the implementing procedures as 8 hours. This annual time limit is set by departments between 21 and 48 days. Exceeding the limit, if set at 21 or less than 48, requires pre-approval by the chair and then by the dean. Going over 48 days requires approval by the chancellor, and we've never asked for this, and I don't anticipate doing it. So I think you should consider, in most instances, and we're always happy to consult and be a resource, but in most instances, 48 days is a hard stop on the number of permissible days for outside activities. The second is the earnings approval threshold. So the plan allows for category 1 and category 2 activities, the faculty member to retain the first $40,000 or 40% of the scale 0 base salary, whichever is greater. So the scale 0 base would be X. The scale 0 base goes above $100,000 at around, I think, Professor 2, let's say. So if you're at less than Professor 2, $40,000 is probably more than 40% of your scale 0 base, but above Professor 2, it begins to march up, and the amount of income that can be retained must be reported but the amount that can be retained grows. Exceeding that threshold, so earning, not retaining, but earning more than $40,000 or 40% of the scale zero base requires pre-approval by your department chair and then by the dean. Income above the threshold, so that additional increment beyond the $40,000 or the 40% is owed to the comp plan. It must be deposited to the plan, and then it's handled according to the departmental compensation plan bylaws. Most of it can come back to the faculty member as a Z payment, but there is an obligation of reporting all of the income that's been received and of depositing the amount above that threshold. Now, what happens to the income above the threshold? Well, there's three options, and to some extent they depend upon another choice that departments make. But once this this extra income has been approved, or any income that's to be deposited to the plan, faculty members are supposed to declare at the beginning of the academic year whether they wish to approve a Z payment for departments with an academic enrichment account, placement in an academic enrichment account, or a combination of both, again, for the same departments. Some departments have academic enrichment accounts and some don't. Obviously, if there's no academic enrichment account in the department, the only opportunity is to receive the payment as a Z payment. Regarding these so-called AEFs, or academic enrichment funds, they are allocated from funds that would have been available to be distributed as Z, and to support university-approved academic professional activities by reimbursing expenses that can be characterized as either an allowable direct charge or something in relation to research or other support for a faculty member's activities, travel, books, things like that, a reimbursable university-related business expense. The ultimate disposition of the funds is solely the department's decision. So please understand that the money, when deposited in the plan, belongs to the regents, but the department essentially states that it will make every effort to distribute the funds according to the rules that are stated, or the principles that are stated in the departmental bylaws. If you have questions about whether your department offers academic enrichment funds and you expect to be earning income above the threshold that will be deposited in the plan, the department administrator can answer that for you. All right, now this is important because this is an area where faculty members have gotten into problems. And this is the idea of non-cash assets that are received in return for an outside professional activity. And the best examples are stock options, and founder's stock. So the fundamental question that you have to ask yourself is, did you receive an asset with net value in return for an outside professional activity? Let's say you served on a board and they gave you stock options. Well, that potentially has a value. As I said at the beginning, it's easier for us to understand and think in terms of money. They give you money, we all kind of get that. But stock options, and founder stock also may have a value, and they must be valued at the time that they are received by the faculty member. The asset must be reported and valued at the time that it's received. So I'm going to just harp on this over and over for just a couple of minutes here. So let's talk specifically about stock options, and founder's stock. If you purchase stock at the market price, there's no obligation to the plan. It's your business how you choose to invest your money. But I used to say, just purchase stock, no obligation. Well, I qualified that a little bit, because if you've been given a special rate for the purchase of stock, then there may be an obligation to the plan, because again, you may have received an asset of net value by the purchase that you make either at this moment, or with stock options and founder stock at some point in the future. So the rule on those is that they must be valued when they are received, and they have to be reported to our office. I'm supposed to value them. when they are received. And that's why I usually say in jest that you can hear a ticker tape in the background, that I'm constantly spending my time valuing stock and options. Well, first of all, I don't have a ticker tape. And second, many of these assets have a future value, but they may not be listed anywhere that can be looked up. So oftentimes I'll ask a faculty member just to get me something from the company that will state how the company is now carrying the value of that asset on their books. And again, the principle is that if the option price is less than the market price, which it usually is not at the time that stock options are received, then there's a difference that's owed to the plan. But recognize the plan is very generous here. All it's saying is that when you get this asset, which probably is worth nothing at the time that you get it, or maybe very little, all you have to do is tell us about it within 30 days that it's received, and we're done. There's never going to be an obligation to the plan. But if you don't tell us, then the valuation is owed to the plan at the time, either when we find out about it or when you actually cash it in. And it's not common. And frankly, I hope for all the things that you folks are doing, whatever you're doing outside, that it eventually the companies strike it rich and the asset is worth millions of dollars. But if it's worth millions of dollars when we find out about it, that is owed to the plan. And it doesn't happen very often, but there have been some big cases in the university where that money is collected. So again, if you have any question about this, if you've received any non-cash asset in relation to an outside professional activity, please be sure that it has been valued at the time that the asset is received. I'm often told, well, it's just a company. We just made it up. There's nothing to it. Well, I just need somebody to confirm that. Usually there's some kind of a financial officer that can just, send an email saying that the value of this asset at the present time, which is offered to the faculty member at some point in the future at whatever it is, 0.0001 cents per share, that's also the current market value. That's the value at which we're carrying it on our books. If there's a difference between those two numbers, then we at least need to look at it. We have faculty members that have gotten tens of thousands of shares, and that valuation that they've received is $10. Okay, that's fine. It's $10. We note that in OATS. It's noted as an asset that's been received. That's well below the $40,000 threshold, and we're done with it. So I can't overstate the importance of this. It is applicable to a relatively small number of faculty, but a growing number as people are using their expertise to found companies and so on. So if you take nothing else away from this, if it has the word stock in it, make sure we talk about it at the time when you receive it. If you decide to buy stock in a company, investing in a company at no preferred rate, that's your own business. That we don't need to talk about. So the outside activities policies of the comp plan, in a nutshell, plan members in good standing, which I'll mention in a minute, are permitted to engage in compensated and uncompensated category 1 and 2 activities up to a maximum time limit as chosen by the department, and to retain earnings from category 1 and 2 activities up to the amounts that we've talked about. Once either of these thresholds, time or earnings, is met, the faculty member must obtain approval to continue to engage in the activity, with the understanding that all earnings received above the approval threshold must be deposited to the compensation plan. Okay, a couple of other things I want to go through now. Is outside clinical practice or moonlighting permitted? No. The comp plan specifically forbids this. Under clinical income, it states that patient care activities must be provided within the university setting as part of an approved affiliation agreement or a professional services agreement. Otherwise, and all clinical income is due to the plan. If you have a question about this, please ask about it. Please ask your department about it. We certainly have many clinical services agreements that are set up in departments where faculty members are practicing outside of the university, but the critical point there is that it's done officially, it's signed off on by the university, and the money comes into the plan and then can be applied to the faculty members' Y income. All right, a few more nuts and bolts now that I just want to mention quickly. The OATS outside activity tracking system, which I recognize is not perfect, could be better, can have frustrations, but still is way, way beyond what we had before OATS, is a system for faculty members to electronically input and track their outside professional activities over the course of the year, and is meant to be an electronic platform to assist with all of the various things that I've talked about up until this point. Again, I know it's not perfect. It actually was developed in the school. The School of Medicine developed OATS. It eventually was adopted by the campus at large, and now it's been adopted by the university at large. So OATS is used by every single faculty member in the university. The imperfections are known. I apologize for them, but it's way beyond what we had when we were doing all of this. On paper, it helps greatly with our accountability, and we recognize what some of the parts that can be frustrating or difficult. We recognize what they are and promise that those will be worked on going forward. This just shows some of the various screens for annual reporting and for logging of activities. What about incorporation? Incorporation used to be something that people did a lot clinicians did a lot when they were in private practice. The plan has an important statement about incorporation. You can't do it. Members of the plan may not formulate partnerships or be separately incorporated or members of a group, professional organization, or the legal equivalent for the provision of healthcare. So I don't know if, it used to be a big deal. Incorporation was a big deal for people in private practice. It very much facilitated their retirement planning and so on, but it is not permitted under the plan. You can't have a professional doctors kind of corporation as a plan member. Another important concept of the plan is the idea of good standing, and the idea is that you must be in good standing in order to enjoy the privileges of the plan, and in particular to get Z income. So the bylaws establish good standing criteria, reasons for loss, and they can be for these kinds of areas shown here: misconduct, unsatisfactory performance, and so on. The loss of good standing may result in a decrease in Y or Z. Loss of good standing is subject to administrative review. There's first a departmental process that is prescribed in the plan. The department chair must sign off on it. Our office needs to know about it. And there is the ability, the faculty member has the rights to appeal to the Comp Plan Advisory Committee, which I will mention now. The Comp Plan Advisory Committee advises the dean regarding the implementation of the Health Sciences Compensation Plan. The membership includes 8 voting participants, 4 of whom are elected and 4 appointed. The vice dean for faculty serves as an ex officio member and chair. The nominations and elections are overseen by the Faculty Executive Committee, and it uses the same election system that we use for other elections to the FEC. So it's broken down into basic science departments, hospital-based departments, medical specialties, and surgical specialties. And this shows you, these are the current elected members, and these are the current appointed members. There was just an election for, and you may have heard about it if it was, we rotate faculty members such that we never elect more than two of the vacancies in an individual year. There are 3-year terms, but there was an election in the last few months conducted by the FEC for the hospital-based specialties and the surgical specialties. So it's a good function for Comp Plan members to serve on this committee. It represents service when you're looking for things to list under service for your dossier, so I encourage people to consider running for election to the committee in the future. We do have a set of FAQs on the website, the link that I showed you earlier, that just talks about many of these kinds of questions that arise. But I also find that the devil is often in the details. Usually faculty members have a very specific kind of question. So rather than answering a hypothetical, we would be very happy at any time to hear what your question is and try to address it directly. Okay, I've tried to talk about these topics today, an overview of the plan and then the various aspects of its workings for individual faculty. I appreciate everybody's attention and we'll be glad to take questions. Will the recording be available online? Yes, we're recording it and we will post it. Does this apply to spouses' business activities? Again, one of the things I've learned, and Dr. Madrinas has heard me say this, I'm very reticent to answer a hypothetical question like that without knowing the specifics. If there's joint ownership, for example, of a business that you and your spouse own together, I'd like to know about it just for us to take a look at it. If it relates to activities that your spouse is doing, generally no. But some administrators, and first of all, people with federal grants have certain reporting requirements in relation to conflict of interest and conflict of commitment. So there may be reporting obligations there. And then people with administrative appointments in the university, such as dean level appointments, assistant and associate deans, and other administrative appointees in the university must complete something called Form 700 each year, which becomes a public document. And there you have to talk about what you and your spouse own jointly. So I'm giving a very long-winded answer. The answer is to almost everything in our office is it depends. And if you have any question about it, let's just ask prospectively so we can be sure. I would say probably not, but I want to be sure that I'm giving the correct answer in relation to your specific question. I think there was a raised hand, but
well, no, there is another question. Who decides and pays X prime, Y, and Z?
Well, the X and X prime is set by your academic rank and step. X prime and Y is determined by a departmental agreement between the faculty member and the chair. And in general, I mean, the easiest way to think about it is in relation to either grant support or clinical income. So if you have grant support and a certain amount of clinical income that's going to, is going to be coming in the coming year, most or all of that will be reflected in Y for that year. So the department chair sits down and says, you have X and X prime coming to you based on your base salary, rank and step, and the academic programmatic unit in which you're placed, and Y based upon the predicted earnings. Z is usually bonus income based on clinical earnings. As I said, it may occasionally be based on some kind of function that the person does for the department, but most commonly Z is based on clinical earnings. And the principle that we try to utilize is to leave about a quarter of the projected earnings in Z so that the faculty member doesn't go into deficit. So that the Y component, so the sum of X prime, and Y would reflect about 3/4 or 80% for clinicians of the earning potential, all of the salary sources that can be mustered for the year, with the idea that about a quarter of it will be left in Z. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but that's the best I could say. If you are at less than 100% commitment, can you do clinical work outside of the university for the remainder? No, not if you're a member of the plan. So regardless, I showed you on a slide that if you're at greater than 51% compensation from the university for all of the typical academic series, you are on the plan. We have faculty members at even below 50% who have chosen to be members of the plan, but if you're a member of the plan, you're subject to the rules of the plan. Now, if you're not a member of the plan, then you may be subject to other rules. For example, if you're employed by the VA or the county, each of whom has their own specific rules related to outside activities. But if you're a plan member, and so thank you for asking that, because I really want to emphasize it. If you're a member of the plan, regardless of your percent of effort, you're subject to all of the rules of the plan, including outside professional activities reporting. Jessica O'Connell said, thanks. Jessica, thank you for being here.
Another question, John? There is
Yes.
another question by Dr. Yao.
Yes.
It says, to confirm, I cannot work 20% at VA and 80% at UCLA if I am part of the comp plan?
Yes, you can. So you can. There's various different components. In fact, you can go up to 150% with the sum of the activities in both places. There's complicated reasons why that is the case, and we're coming to the end of the hour. But yes, if that's the way your salary has been put together, you can certainly do that. But if you're at 80% at UCLA, you will be a member of the comp plan. But yes, you can certainly you can put this together in any way that amounts to up to or less than 150% between the two. And that's a broad rule of thumb. So please don't go back to your department and say they should immediately increase your percent of effort here. Each individual case has to be looked at based upon what the specific appointment is, what the activities are. But the answer to this question is, you can work 20% at the VA and 80% at UCLA and be a member of the plan. All right, well, that takes us almost to the end of the hour. Is there anyone else that would like to yell out a question or raise a hand? If not, thanks everyone for being here. Our next session is going to be on November 17th. I'm thinking we're going to do something about academic affairs, nuts and bolts, probably series, ranks, and steps, something along those lines. We will announce that, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody then. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day.